All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we'll be flying to the beautiful Green Isle, Ireland, another land steeped in mythology, history, and beautiful scenery. Let's take off and enjoy our trip. We'll be flying Aer Lingus. This airline has been in existence since 1936 and has had transatlantic flights since 1958. The flight takes about 14 and a half hours from Fresno. And as we begin our descent, ladies and gentlemen, if you look out of the right side of the plane, you'll see Dublin International Airport. We are officially on Irish soil. Since we're already here in Dublin, let's have our first stop to be Trinity College in Dublin. The building facade of Trinity College is among many constructed since the foundation of the college on March 13, 1592. The design is attributed to Theodore Jacobson, a London-based amateur architect. Officially, the College of the Holy and Undivided Trinity of Queen Elizabeth near Dublin is the sole constituent college of the University of Dublin. The college was founded in 1592 by Queen Elizabeth I as the mother of a new university, modeled after the collegiate universities of Oxford and Cambridge. But unlike these other ancient universities, only one college was ever established. As such, the designations Trinity College and University of Dublin are usually synonymous for practical purposes. It is one of the 7 ancient universities of Britain and Ireland, as well as Ireland's oldest surviving university. One of the greatest treasures of Trinity College is the library. The library contains about 5 million books, including 30,000 current serials and significant collections of manuscripts, maps, and printed music. 3 million books are held in the book depository, known as stacks, in Saintry, from which requests are retrieved twice daily. The library is one of Ireland's biggest tourist attractions and holds thousands of rare, in many cases very early volumes. Another of Ireland's treasures is also kept here at Trinity College, a harp. The Brian Burroughs harp, also known as Trinity College harp. It's a medieval musical instrument on display in the long room at Trinity College. It is an early Irish harp. It's dated to the 14th or 15th century, and along with the Queen Mary harp and the Lamont harp, is one of the 3 oldest surviving Gaelic harps. The harp was used as a model for the coat of arms of Ireland. The harp may be the oldest existence harp in the world. A sea of green in a grey sea, rather like Ireland herself, is St. Stephen's Green in Dublin, sort of the Irish Central Park. St. Stephen's Green is a beautifully well-kept park in the middle of Ireland's capital. Until 1663, St. Stephen's Green was a marshy common on the edge of Dublin used for grazing. In that year, Dublin Corporation, seeing an opportunity to raise much-needed revenue, decided to enclose the center of the common and to sell land around the perimeter for building. The park was enclosed with a wall in 1664. The houses built around the green were rapidly replaced by new buildings in the Gregorian style, and by the end of the 18th century, the green was a place of resort for the better off of the city. During the Easter Rising of 1916, a group of insurgents, made up mainly of members of the Irish Citizen Army, established a position in St. Stephen's Green. They numbered between 200 and 250. They confiscated motor vehicles to establish roadblocks on the streets that surround the park, and dug defensive positions in the park itself. This approach differed from that of taking up positions in buildings adopted elsewhere in the city. It proved to have been unwise when elements of the British Army took up positions in the Shelbourne Hotel at the northeast corner of St. Stephen's Green, overlooking the park, from which they could shoot down into the entrenchments. Finding themselves in a weak position, the volunteers withdrew to the Royal College of Surgeons on the west side of the Green. During the rising, of course, fire was temporarily halted to allow the park's groundsmen to feed the local ducks. And here is that fateful Shelbourne Hotel, now one of the most iconic hotels in Ireland because of its role in the Easter Uprising, as well as because of its amazing afternoon tea. The hotel is also famous because in the early 1900s, Alois Hitler Jr. and the elder half-brother of Adolf Hitler worked in the hotel while in Dublin, and in 1922, the Irish Constitution was drafted in Room 112, now known as the Constitution Room. The Lord Mayor's Lounge is an expression of elegance and style, where every detail has been crafted to reflect the hotel's long history. Comfort and glamour combined makes it a favorite spot for our renowned Shelbourne afternoon tea, which has become an iconic tradition in Dublin. It is not uncommon to see famous Irish and international faces mingling with local Dubliners enjoying this award-winning indulgence. If you'd prefer something more intimate and personal, we can have dinner tonight in the Constitution Room, which I mentioned before. There are two white-gloved and waist-coated footmen who attend to dinners with Vera Wang porcelain, flowers, and silver candelabras. We won't talk about the cost here, since my heart isn't too good, but it will certainly be a night to remember. Not only is the food amazing and the ambiance outstanding, but the history of the room add another extra polish to the gleaming china. The rooms are, of course, luxurious because here at the Terraces, we never stay in anything less. So after a bit of shut-eye, tomorrow we'll get started on the rest of our tour. Bright and early the next morning, who wants to try a traditional full Irish breakfast? An American breakfast is similar at first. Our traditional breakfast is the kind you see at Denny's: eggs, toast, bacon, pancakes, coffee, and orange juice. While in Ireland, they have some similar foods, and some not so similar. So let's start with the beans, which are oozing across the plate. Americans eat these sweet bacon and molasses flavored beans usually at barbecues and never at breakfast. They're fairly standard at an Irish breakfast. Above them you see a little gold crispy triangle. That's familiar at least, hash browns. Americans might have gotten their breakfast hash browns from the Irish, though sometimes the potatoes at breakfast are more like potato cakes, a proper hash, maybe even corned beef hash, or baked. The eggs and toast are similar, though the bacon is a little floppier than Americans like. The two sausages in the middle there are familiar breakfast sausages, but we don't usually have fried mushrooms. They're in the center. And below that, what looks like two scallops on a chocolate cookie, well, that's actually more sausages, white and black sausage. A primary ingredient in either is blood from pork, so you'll excuse me if I don't have any. At the top there is a roasted tomato, not a popular American choice, and all of this is fried in butter, sometimes all in one skillet. While we're talking about Irish food, there's one that we surely can't forget. Arthur Guinness was born on September 28, 1725, to a family of brewers on the estate of Arthur Price. When the Archbishop died in 1752, he left £100 each to his servant Arthur and his father. The event marked the beginning of Guinness Brewing Company's story. At that time, £100 was a large sum of money, and it was equivalent of 4 years' wages. When Arthur was 34 years old, he moved to the capital city of Ireland in order to open a brewery there, hoping to expand his business. He found an old, dilapidated brewery named St. James Gate Brewery in the southwest of Dublin. The owner of St. James Gate Brewery required £100 as a down payment and £45 per month for rent. On the last day of December 1759, Arthur somehow managed to get the owner to agree to a lease for up to 9,000 years on these terms. Guinness is still brewed at St. James Gate, and the company still pays £45 in rent each month. Arthur Guinness believed that liquor, especially gin, was destroying the lower classes in Ireland in the 1750s, and he also believed that everyone should have access to high-quality beer and a healthier form of alcohol. This is why he brewed the high-quality black porter, his legendary Guinness Stout. The Guinness family actually remains large philanthropists in the Irish community, doing charitable work with their profits. As years passed by, Guinness grew to be one of the largest and most respected breweries in the world. By 1838, Guinness's St. James Gate Brewery was the largest in Ireland, and by 1914, the St. James Gate was the world's largest brewery. It has become a staple of Irish symbolism and culture. So where does one go to get their pint of Guinness or their traditional Irish breakfast? The most classically Irish sight of all, a pub. Irish pubs are so popular in experience that it is estimated that up to 54% of tourists have eating at an Irish pub in their top reasons to visit the country. A traditional pub is a place where locals congregate and share news, gossip, drinks, and music. Irish pubs are very different from one another, so while in America they look very similar, in Ireland you can find bars in all shapes and sizes. Like this one being bright yellow and large. Or this pub that's freestanding and has a modern feeling. Or this sleek, very modern gastropub, which experiment with recipes and drink mixing, using chemical reactions to shape and cook food, mix drinks, and change textures. But all of these pubs feature similar roles in Irish culture. One of those roles is providing a place to present music. This band that I'm about to play at the pub we've just ducked into really helps show how Irish music has influenced American music, especially what we call country music. Let's listen for just a minute.
Tell me now when I go home, the boys won't leave the girls alone. Pull my hair, stole my comb, but that's alright till I go home. She's handsome, she's pretty, she's the belle of all the city. She's a court in the 1, 2, 3. Please won't you tell me who is she? Well, Albert Rooney says he loves her, all the boys are fighting for her. The knock on the door, the ring the bell, say no, my true love, are you well? Out she comes as white as snow, rings on her fingers, spells on her toe. Old Johnny Murray says he'll die if she doesn't get the fellow with the roving eye. And tell me now when I go home, the boys won't leave the girls alone. Pull on my hair, stole my clothes, but that's alright till I go home. She's handsome, she's pretty, she's the belle of all the city. She's a court in the 1, 2, 3. Please will you tell me who is she?
The most common instruments used in Irish traditional dance music, whose history goes back several hundred years, are the fiddle, tin whistle, flute, and uilleann pipes. The button accordion made its appearance in Irish traditional music late in the 19th century. The 4-string tenor banjo, first used by Irish musicians in the U.S. in the 1920s, is now fully accepted. The guitar was used as far back as the 1930s. Due to the Great Famine of the 1840s, 1 million people died, and there is no doubt that much of the tradition in the form of songs, stories, and tunes died with them. The subsequent wave of immigration of over 2 million people, which accompanied the famine, though a devastating factor in Irish life, did help to bring that music tradition further afield. Thousands of Irish people were spread across the world from the USA to Australia. On leaving Ireland, the immigrants brought with them their songs and music, and a traditional Irish music network was fully established in cities such as New York, Chicago, and Boston, where there was a concentrated Irish population. The potato famine is an important part of Irish history, particularly since it is actually, relatively speaking, so recent. On the streets of Dublin, near the port, are these very graphic and sad statues which represent the starving and dying population of Ireland as they try to reach Dublin port on foot to escape from Ireland and avoid certain death in Ireland by starvation. The statues represent the starving and dying population of this terrible time of the potato famine, which lasted from 1845 to 1848. The work is entitled Famine. It was presented to the people of Ireland by Norma Smurfit on May 29, 1997. In 1997, Tony Blair, the British Prime Minister, made the first formal apology for Britain's role in the Irish famine. Between 1845 and 1855, Ireland lost a third of its population. 1 million people died from starvation and disease, and 2 million immigrated. Mr. Blair regretted a time when those who governed in London had failed their people. The decimation of the potato crop in the 1840s brought on the danger of mass starvation, but it was the British response that perpetuated the tragedy. Although Ireland was part of the British Commonwealth and thus owed loyalty and aid by the British, anti-Irish, anti-Catholic sentiment had been, and some say still is, pervasive in English culture. One absurd project to introduce a money economy was part of the public works scheme. Peasants were hired to build unnecessary roads in order to earn money to buy food, but wages were often not enough to match the high food prices enforced by the Prime Minister of England. The belief that famine was God's intention also guided much of Britain's policy. They viewed the crop failure as a visitation of providence, an expression of divine displeasure. Next, I've arranged for us to take a trip to Skellig Michael, one of the oldest monasteries in Ireland. The 6th century monastery stands high on the rocky outcrop of the largest of 2 Skellig Islands. Getting to the Skellig Islands is half the fun. The ride out by small boats faces rough seas, giving us an adventure while we take in the amazing views. More often than not, trips are canceled due to weather. Sometimes, if you do manage to get to the island, the surging seas put a stop to any chance of making a landing. We were lucky enough to have blue skies on the day of our landing at Skellig Michael. It was a thrilling experience to step off the boat in the choppy waters and climb up the narrow steps. From here, we started along the path, clinging to the side of a cliff, leading us 600 feet above sea level. After about a half an hour of climbing, we made it to the top to view the beehive stone cells. These beehives are where the monks lived, dating back to the 6th century. They survived elements and Viking invasions through the centuries. The monks lived off of rainwater, seabirds, and the odd sea lion for food. Life was difficult on the island, but it gave them the seclusion they were looking for. The Cloisters community at Skellig Michael was never very big, probably only 12 monks. At a time in the 1100s, the monks left the island and joined the Augustine monastery at Ballinskelligs on the mainland. The conditions in the monastery illustrate the ascetic way of life of the early Christian monks in Ireland. While this might seem an extreme place to live, archaeological evidence is now showing that the monks of Ireland were influenced by Egyptian Christian practices, where monks would go out into the desert to live in clay huts or caves in very harsh conditions. Egyptian techniques for creating art and binding books have been replicated in Ireland, showing a strong likelihood that some monks, perhaps early in the Irish Christianity, spent time in Egypt studying Christianity. Of course, for the Irish, the great saint of their country is St. Patrick, who spread Christianity throughout the island. He is revered as the enlightener of Ireland and celebrated on his feast day throughout the country, such as in this parade here in Dublin. Traditionally, St. Patrick has many legends around him, such as having written certain prayers and having driven all of the snakes out of Ireland, driving them into the sea. To this day, it is a fact that there are no native snakes in Ireland, making it, in my opinion, an excellent place to live. Actually, the snakes are generally taken to being symbolic of paganism and sin, and driving the snakes out is a metaphor for having rid Ireland of paganism. While we're talking about the past, let's have a trip to Bunratty Castle and Folk Park. Built in 1425, it was restored in 1954 to its former medieval splendor and now contains mainly 15th and 16th century furnishings, tapestries, and works of art which capture the mood of those times. The site on which Bunratty Castle stands was in origin a Viking camp in 970. The present structure is the last of 4 castles to be built on the site. Now, I don't know if back in the States anyone has been to colonial Williamsburg in Virginia, but Bunratty Folk Park is similar to that. It is a reconstruction of village life in the 19th century Ireland. The village houses and shops in the folk park have been chosen from many different areas to form a collection of typical 19th century urban Irish buildings, including the school, doctor's house, pawnbrokers, pub, drapery, printworks, grocery, hardware shop, pottery, and a post office. Bunratty also has a special area known as the Fairy Village, where guests can greet the wee folk who live alongside us biggins. Ireland, of course, has a rich history of fairy mythology, and you can still find some who believe in them to this day. Which is an excellent introduction to our next stop, Carlingford Louth Preserve, home of the only leprechaun. The story all began in 1989 with a man by the name of P.J. O'Hare. O'Hare was tending to his garden when he heard a scream coming from the nearby Foy Mountain. He rushed up the mountain to find something that astonished him: scorched earth and charred bones surrounded by a green suit, hat, and several other items. These were all very small size, including the skeletal remains. He also found 4 gold coins. He became convinced that these items belonged to a genuine, now deceased, leprechaun. He placed all the items inside of a glass box at his pub, where they remain to this day. Some of the people of Carlingford believed him while others didn't. One of his friends, who didn't believe him, wanted to find out whether there really were leprechauns in the area, so he arranged a leprechaun hunt, in which he hid 5 ceramic leprechauns and 1,000 Irish pounds of prize money under each one who could find them. His friend reasoned that in looking for the ceramic leprechauns, one of the hunters might accidentally come across a real leprechaun. There were no such sightings. The hunt is now done every year in March on a Sunday. Our last visit in this amazing country is going to be to the ruins of a castle, to kiss a rock. Yes, this is Blarney Castle. The castle originally dates from before 1200, when a timber house was believed to have been built on the site, although no evidence remains of this. Around 1210, this was replaced by a stone fortification. It was destroyed in 1446, but subsequently rebuilt. What we really came to see, however, is one stone embedded in the top of one of the towers. In the tower parapet is the Blarney Stone, a stone which, when kissed, is said to give the kisser the gift of Blarney, an eloquence of speech, pervasive powers of language, a power of flattery, and the ability to deceive without offending. But to kiss the stone, we have to climb all the stairs in the tower and then lean over backwards over a hole in the wall and kiss the stone. No easy feat. It's no easy feat, though handrails have now been installed. It used to be one had to have a friend hold one's feet while leaning over the hole. Everyone ready to line up? It's not for everyone. And so we kissed the Blarney Stone and kissed goodbye to a very full trip to Ireland. It's been so much fun traveling this country with you. And I think we might just round out our British Isles tour by going to Scotland next. I'll see you all next week.